What's happening, people, and welcome to Wells Fargo's Beyond College Web Series, brought to you in partnership with the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. Today, episode number 3 of our series, and we're so glad to have all of you with us as we dive into building resumes, winning resumes, and preparing for success in your job interviews. I'm Lynn Thompson. I happen to be the strategic advisor to the commissioner of the MEAC Conference. The MEAC is honored to partner with our teammates at Wells Fargo to bring this series to you. Wells Fargo happens to be one of the great partners of all HBCUs across the nation. And this is a big deal. It's so big, in fact, that we've got some pros working behind the scenes directing the show, like Angel Heyman of Wells Fargo's meetings and events, Randy Brent, Dominique Garcia, and Sheena Dean, also from the MEAC team, who you'll see later on. None of this would be possible without them. And so we'll talk more about our moderators and our panelists, who you'll meet on the screen in just a few. But last month, we dove headfirst into mentors, sponsors, and your personal board of directors. Each of us are basically the CEOs of our own corporations. And based on the feedback that we received and the questions that you raised, this was right on time for many of you. And as always, Wells Fargo rolls out a lineup of their top pros in this space who continuously drop some knowledge, some serious knowledge on us. Why? Well, that's because that's what you deserve. I mean, you need to get this info straight from the well. And that's what's going to happen today as we start with episode number 3. Why? Because it's loaded with a lineup of the greatest hitters for sure, who are going to drop some nuggets on you. And that's what Wells Fargo and the MEAC have committed to do for you, because you are our next generation of leaders. For those of you who may not know a whole lot about the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, the MEAC, well, the MEAC is a corporation of 8 of the greatest HBCUs in America who are aligned by mission and by vision. And for over 53 years, our job is simply educating young people like you. But we also believe in the total student experience now. So that's why we compete together as NCAA Division I athletic schools and programs to further the goals of each institution of winning championships and building championship lives for our students. We compete in 14 sports as a league, and we've been rolling out championship after championship. In fact, you know about the HBCU National Championship game, better known as the Cricket Celebration Bowl. That happens in Atlanta. 2 weeks ago, we hosted our annual MEAC Hoops Championship in Norfolk, Virginia. And congratulations to the Howard Bison for winning the men's championship, and for the Norfolk State Spartans for their back-to-back women's titles. Hey, we also had a ball with esports, with the University of Maryland Eastern Shore winning the MEAC esports title during this whole big weekend of fun in Norfolk. Now, one of the great 8 MEAC institutions happens to be Howard University, and it's located in Washington, D.C. Established in 1867 by Oliver Otis Howard, the Bison joined the MEAC as a founding member of the league in 1970. The Mecca, that's Howard's nickname. Well, Howard is number 2 of all HBCUs, number 2 in the nation. Its graduation rate happens to be at 81%. That's strong, with an enrollment of over 9,000 great students. Howard's known for its medical, law schools, and its graduates in the performing arts are legendary. But they're back-to-back MEAC football kings in 23 and 24. And oh yeah, they're rolling in hoops, golf, track and field too. See, the HU brand is worldwide, and the Bison are doing a super job of handling their business on all fronts. And speaking of business, it's a heck of a deal for the MEAC to team up with Wells Fargo. So now that you know who we are and why the MEAC has teamed up with this great company, well, now Sheena and I will circle back to handle Q&A portion after a while. But for now, we're done with these appetizers. It's time for the main course. That's right. So it's time for me to dish this thing off to Wells Fargo's go-to guy for enterprise HBCU strategy and external engagement, my good friend and brother, Dewey Norwood. Now, Dewey, if episode number 3 is anything close to the past 2 webinars, there's going to be a big feast on this knowledge. And I can't wait to see what you and this phenomenal team will serve up to you today. So, brother, it's on you. You got it.
Mr. Thompson, thank you very much for the kind sentiments there, and also for that walkthrough. I think it's so helpful for all of our participants that are joining us live or listening to the playback of this recording. You need to understand the strength, the depth of the MEAC, 50 plus years impacting HBCU campuses. And here we are celebrating this work through this year's Beyond College webinar series. So Mr. Thompson, always glad to have you on, and looking forward to having you and Sheena on a little bit later on in the broadcast, as you referenced, for our Q&A portion of things. I do want to spotlight something. Wells Fargo was very fortunate, team, just a few weeks ago to receive a very, very significant accolade from the MEAC. And if we have that slide, I'll ask the team to bring it up. Wells Fargo was actually recognized as the MEAC's Corporate Partner of the Year. And this, to me, is just a testament to the amazing work that leaders across our institution are doing to support HBCUs, to help students, to help alumni, to help our communities continue to grow in lots of great ways. So that special thanks to Commissioner Stills and to the entire leadership team that made this decision. I believe they voted right here by picking Wells Fargo as the Corporate Partner of the Year for 2024. So thank you so much, MEAC, for recognizing our firm and the work that we continue to embark on in the days ahead. Hey, the next slide is that one that's just got my contact information on it. Dewey Norwood. I'll be celebrating 26 years in the banking industry here in just a couple of days. And so very blessed, very thankful for what we've been able to get accomplished, and looking forward to what we'll be building on for the future. That QR code will point over to my LinkedIn profile. You can jump out there to be able to keep the conversation going. Hey, as we continue, the next slide will actually spotlight a little bit about Wells Fargo. And so just from the numbers perspective, again, you're all with a banker, so you know we got to talk numbers, right? $1.9 trillion in assets. 1 in 3 households across the U.S. in some way, shape, or form engaging with our institution. I also love the fact that 10% of small businesses in the U.S. are engaging and working with Wells Fargo. My wife's a small business owner. We love small business and being able to support in those types of areas. So you'll see other rankings. Would encourage you to jump online, make sure that you follow Wells Fargo on LinkedIn, and you can also visit our website to be able to learn more about the institution. Hey, the next slide is going to spotlight some numbers relative to our corporate philanthropy efforts. And so in the last 12 years, Wells Fargo has provided over $119 million of financial support holistically for education programming. Pretty significant, right? If you disaggregate that data, pull it apart some, now over $40 million of financial support that's gone directly to supporting HBCUs. So programming, scholarships, events like you're seeing here, or programming that's happening in other kinds of areas, doing a really, really great job of spotlighting that work and making sure we're finding ways to support these amazing institutions of higher education. All right, scholars, I've got some homework for you now on the next slide. Got to have you jump on and take a great look at a brand new platform called Game Plan. And a huge shout out to our buddy Cecil Burrows. Cecil may be out there in Radio Land listening or listening to the playback, but this is a great program that Cecil is running. You guys can find him on LinkedIn. But this program, it has been brought to us as a means of giving student athletes the resources that they need along their higher education journey, with a specific focus on financial education. You can scan the QR code that'll take you back to the press release that was issued last month. You can learn all about this Game Plan platform and our ability, again, to get this information out to your campuses and to share the information to help you along your financial journey. Really, really great resource that is now available through our great partnership with Game Plan. And again, huge shout out to Cecil Burrows and the team, Addie Craver and others that are making this amazing work happen. Hey, listen, we got to talk a little bit on the product side very, very briefly. Want to spotlight an exciting program that launched for us now 2 years ago, April. And these are our HBCU Legends debit cards. So we actually have a great slate of now over 40 HBCU debit cards in celebration of HBCUs. And so you can scan that QR code. It'll take you out to the page where you can learn more. Really excited about the institutions. And at the end of the broadcast, we'll actually bring up a listing of all of the different schools that are connected into that program today. And hey, if you don't see your school on that list, get in contact with us. Get in contact with Damon Ford or Tamika Lindsay or the rest of the team. And in turn, we want to make sure that your institution gets connected in. Hey, Lynn, one of my favorite cards is on this next slide. And you can't have an HBCU Legends card collection without being able to spotlight the mighty MEAC, the MEAC Nation. So you'll see the amazing card that's here. So this one is actually readily available for any of our retail banking customers. You can customize your banking experience and go ahead and get that MEAC card. Really, really handsome. Step in with us, Mr. Thompson, and get that MEAC card. Hey, last but not least, team, do want to spotlight some additional programming that's coming up. We're really excited that our firm's direct support of the A Different World Tour continues. Was just on a call earlier today with Iwana K. Brady, who's leading that work for our institution. So you will see the next tour stop that's going to be taking place on the campus of Howard University on April the 9th. Couple of notes on this one. Please note, this event is only going to be open to students on Howard's campus, but you can scan that QR code, boom, fill out the information, and then in turn, you can get registered to participate or get in contact with the team there from the A Different World Tour and let them know, hey, listen, we want you to come to our campus. We want you to come and engage with our students here to talk a little bit about what happens maybe during your college years and then certainly what happens after you finish. So huge shout out to Daryl Bell and to the entire cast that's putting together this amazing, amazing tour. So you can Google it or hit that QR code to be able to learn more. All right, with that said, we've covered off on our top items. Want to bring on the real stars of today's broadcast. Really excited that we've got Elizabeth, Alicia, and also Eli, or Elijah Fox as he goes for his government name. We'll call him by his full name. These are exceptional leaders in our early talent programs team. And Elijah, Elizabeth, really excited to be on with you all today. I know you've got a lot to be able to unpack and share with our students that are joining us. And scholars, please go ahead and hit those QR codes there that should take you over to their LinkedIn profiles to be able to make those connections as well. So Liz, Eli, want to hand the reins over to you all to take it away from here. Thanks a million, everybody. We'll give it to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dewey. I appreciate the nice intro. My name's Elizabeth Alicia. As Dewey said, I'm on our targeted sourcing team here at Wells Fargo. Have been at Wells for about 9 years and sit in Charlotte, North Carolina. Really excited to be able to be here today to talk to you more about preparing for your interview. We hear from recruiters all the time how students, how we can help them prepare. So really excited to be able to share with you some tips and tricks to get ready. But before we do that, I'll turn it over to Eli, who can talk to you a little bit more about your resume.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. Hey, everybody, I'm Elijah Fox. As you've heard, everyone calls me Eli here. I've been with Wells Fargo here coming up on, I'm about to enter year 3 in about like 3 weeks. So it's been awesome. Looked at a lot of resumes in the last 2 to 3 years and definitely have some exciting tips. So appreciate you guys being here. And as Elizabeth mentioned, we'll get into the tips for resume building. So starting with the next slide, you're going to see here that we discuss the 4 pillars really of a resume and what you want to have in mind when you're going ahead and constructing that resume to start applying. So the first one is your resume is a ticket to an interview. Obviously, it's the first impression you're going to make. A recruiter like myself will get your resume in and a sea of other hundreds, thousands even of resumes. And so you really want to make sure that it's a good first impression and showcases all of your abilities with your relevant experience, and then obviously also your career advancements that you've had. So moving on, here we're going to look at the beginning of formulating your resume. We're going to discuss what employers and recruiters like myself look for, and some of it's going to be things that might be minor details, but you would be surprised that the minor details can really make or break an opportunity for yourself to get into the door for an interview. So to start off on the left, you'll see formatting. It seems like something basic and simple, but really after you've constructed the entirety of your resume, you want to just go in and make sure everything is formatted properly. You want the same fonts across the board. You want the same chronological order. So things for most relevant experience in terms of your last opportunities, and then build it out as it gets further out. Grammatical errors and typos, you obviously want to go through and look at. And just from a recruiter's lens, what we do when we get a resume, we, at least here at Wells Fargo, we do review the resumes that we get. There's no like AI or things that screen it out for us. It is us going in and reviewing it. So the better you have it formatted, the more uniformed it looks and the easier it is for me to pull it up, glance and pull out some of your relevant experience, the more likely it is that I'm going to be able to say, hey, this person would be a great fit for this program. Going into that, for personal information, you do want to include your permanent and school address. So I always tell people the address that you have on your resume should be an address where if we sent something to you next week, you'd be able to go ahead and access it or be in the know that you got something from us. You want to have your expected graduation date. So we understand that it can change. It's an expected graduation date, but it really helps us identify which opportunities may be best for you. So there are times where people are applying for an internship when they're actually qualified for our full-time opportunities based on their graduation date. So as best of your ability, the expected month and year would be fantastic. And then you want to make sure you have both your email and your phone number on your resume. I actually myself have had a resume where I forgot to put my email on there, and a recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn and let me know, hey, we're not interested in you for this opportunity, but you should probably go ahead and put your email or your phone number on your resume so that if we were, we could reach out to you. So you just want to make sure that we have as much access to contact you as possible, and having those things are important. You're going to want to have all of your experience listed, and we'll touch a little bit more on this in a little bit, but experience can be in a variety of different things. And most experience can be relevant experience depending on how you tailor it and what you decide to highlight in those job functions. Any leadership and activities that you do either outside of work or during school or things of that nature are awesome to highlight. We definitely like to see holistic students that are well-rounded. And so those are always nice to see, as well as awards and honors. So scholarships or any merit recognition help us just understand a little bit better from your resume who you are and what kind of student you're gonna, what kind of student you are. And that allows us to understand who we're going to be bringing on to the firm, or whatever company is looking at you. So moving forward, the next slide we're going to discuss, I believe this is going to be the dues. Yep. So here we have the dues on your resume. These are going to be the things that you want to make sure that you include on your resume, and it's just going to help everything go a little bit smoother and help you stand out a little bit better. You want to really keep it down to one page if possible. The way I recommend doing this is if you create your resume and realize you're at a page and a half or 2 pages, really go in and look at what you're highlighting as your experience or things of that nature. Ask yourself, is it important to the job that you're applying for? Is it relevant? Is it showing the skill sets that I have that would translate over to this company? And if it's not, you might want to take it off. A lot of times recruiters aren't going to have enough time in the initial review to go and read a 3 or 4 page resume in depth. So you really want to use that 1 page limit, make sure everything is getting on the page that would be relevant for the job that you're applying to. And that will just help us be able to review you in a much more in-depth way. You want to use action verbs, but then another big one is that third data point that you can see here is use data to quantify accomplishments. So for example, as a recruiter, if I wanted to say that in this region, we went from 5 applicants to 10 applicants. That's not how I would say that on a resume. I might say I increased applications in this region by 200%. Means the same exact thing, but one sounds a little bit more professional, one sounds a little bit more of an accolade. And so doing that really pops as well. When I see things in terms of data, like percentages or things of that nature, it really pops out and it makes me go back and say, well, what were they talking about here? So it's just another way to catch someone's eye. You always want to have at least 2 people review your resume and get feedback. I obviously recommend having a professional. If you can find someone that might hire a hiring manager or a recruiter to do that, then that's always fantastic. And then be willing to take the feedback. Obviously you want your resume to represent you, so your opinion is going to matter the most, but it's always good to get that extra set of eyes on there and ensure that there's no quick fix errors that might make or break the resume in the process. Obviously include the correct contact information. A big one is sometimes you list your school emails. If you're a graduating senior and you think that school email is not going to be available to you in the next month or 2 months, you might want to take that off and put your personal email. Just make sure whatever contact information is on your resume is going to be correct and that you can be reached there. And then, last but not least, be truthful. There's one thing to tailor your experience and highlight the skills that you might have gotten at other jobs. Even if it seems like the role's not relevant, there are ways to showcase how it translates over. but you never want to lie on your resume. Recruiters can tell when they get on the phone with you. Hiring managers can definitely tell on, final interviews and things like that. And the last thing that you want to do is have an opportunity at getting a position you're looking at, and then when you go more in depth on the resume, you start showcasing that maybe you weren't 100% honest. And so we're all human. We understand that we don't know everything, and we don't expect you to know everything. Most companies don't. And so oftentimes it means more when you say, hey, you know what? I might not know that, but I'm a hard worker. I'm coming willing to learn, and I'm going to put my head down and grind it out. So just make sure you're being truthful. And then the last little tidbit that just makes everything a little easier on the recruiter's end, makes maybe get some more bees with honey situation, is save your resume last name and then first name. So for me, I would save it as Fox, Elijah resume, or whatever, Fox, Elijah. And that just helps us when we save it to make sure we're sorting it out and being able to do that. So those are some of the do's on the resumes. Now let's move over and talk about some of the things you're not going to want to include, or the don'ts on your resume. So you don't want to include irrelevant and fluff, quote unquote, information. And so really, you want your resume to be concise and to the point, while also showcasing all of your experience and accomplishments. And so if you're getting really wordy, or you're trying to make something look maybe a little more fluffed up than it needs to be, I promise you, it doesn't help the situation. It honestly might help make that resume not one page. And as a recruiter, I really just want to see the data points as to what you've done, what you've accomplished, and is it relevant to the role that I'm looking at you for. All of the extra stuff, save it for the interview in a concise format, but you definitely want to make sure it's concise and to the point. Include some personal information, some things like hobbies, family status, physical characteristics, etc. Those are things you don't really want to include on your resume. It's okay if you have maybe a hobby that would include something tailored to that job. But as far as like, if you're really into playing football on the weekend with your friends or something like that, maybe just leave that off of the resume. It's something that as we go through our process, we'll get to know a little bit more about you, but it's not always necessarily the most relevant for the resume. The last portion of it that we want to include, we want to call out rather, is don't get fancy with the formatting, including using graphics, pictures, lengthy paragraphs, things of that nature. The resume doesn't have to be something spectacular to look at, things of that nature. As I mentioned before, and you'll hear me mention it a lot, it needs to be concise, to the point, and showcasing your relevant experience and your accolades. If you've done that, then it doesn't matter how fancy you make it look or pictures. Once you try to play around with it too much, it gets distracting. And honestly, when you're going through, as a recruiter, when we're going through hundreds of resumes at a time, the harder it is for me to just be able to look at your resume and see you've done A, B, and C, the less likely it is for you to get an opportunity into an interview, because I don't have 45 minutes per resume to spend highlighting everything for you. You need to make sure you're doing that for yourself and putting yourself in the best position. So those are the don'ts. Obviously, also copy and paste resume into the application tool. Just make sure that you download it in there. If you copy and paste it, it can screw up the formatting a little bit and things of that nature. So that's just a key takeaway as well. But moving forward, we're going to go ahead and discuss. Sorry, a little bit of a delay, no problem. But build your resume according to the job description. So I'm not going to read directly off the slide. You can see it, but I do think this is something, as you've heard me touch on earlier while I've been talking, this is a huge thing, and oftentimes the most important to me when building a resume that can really get your foot in the door with an interview. And what you want to do when you're going to apply to a job, a lot of people have one resume that then they go and throw out to 100 different applications, and they find out that the hit rate is usually less than 5%. It's not very good, and nor should it be. As a recruiter, when I'm looking at filling a role, I want to make sure that I'm bringing people forward that have done their research, that have relevant skills, and that show they understand, at least to some capacity, what the job is that they're applying for, and that there's a true, genuine interest there. That tells me that we're going to be a good fit for them, and they're going to be a good fit for us. And so when you're building your resume, it's important to really tailor it to each job that you're applying to. You want to go ahead and pull up the job description. Look at the basics of the desired requirements and then the must-haves, I like to call them, and make sure that at the bare minimum, at all of the must-have requirements, your resume highlights how you hit those and meet them. For the desired requirements, those are like, the cherry on tops. We'd like you to do this or like you to do that. And those are good ways to translate your experience to those as well. So that way, if you do get on the phone with a recruiter or you talk to a hiring manager, you can say, I thought this role was a great fit for myself because you're looking for A, B, and C, and my past experience has touched on A, B, and C in this way. So those are always extremely important for you to do. You want to highlight the years of experience and make sure that they match the years of experience that are required. And so again, I look at even something like some people I've talked to say, oh, well, through college, I was a server and I don't really want to put that on a professional resume. That's something that if you're looking for a job that requires 3 years of customer service or customer facing experience, that would be something that would qualify under server. It's just about how you tailor it. So really go back and look at the job description, think about how what you've previously done is relevant, and then make sure that it ties. And also, obviously, like we talked about, be truthful with it. So that's really how you want to build your resume. You want to build it based on the job that you're applying to. You want to tailor each one and showcase that, hey, I've done the research on what this job requires. This is how my experience ties into it. And this is why I'm going to be a great fit for you. You want to make us feel like we need you on the team and not like we're trying to pull from random spots to make sure that we can get you qualified. So last slide I believe that I have to cover here is going to be talking or showcasing rather the difference between a good resume and a not so great resume. So you're going to get a before and after. On the left where the name is in red, you can see this is how a resume looks. And, maybe on first glance, it's not the worst resume you might have ever seen. However, there are definitely some red flags with it. As you can see, the alignment is off. The font is different. There are things that are bolded while others are not bolded. The name is in red. And it just kind of looks messy. And as a recruiter, when I see this, I can tell you, I'm not going to read a book for me evaluating you when you submit it if I have 1,000 other resumes. And that sounds harsh, but I want to give it to you in the honest way so that you can be prepared as you get ready for your job hunt. It's hard to read. It's clustered and, there's not a lot of things that are pleasant to the eye, which makes me want to spend a little less time going for it because it doesn't look like this person's overly organized and has everything highlighted in the way that it needs to be. On the right side, you can see what happens after the edits were made and everything was brought to suit. And so everything is aligned properly. Everything is spaced out. One of the things I want to call out here is, and this is something I struggled with for a long time, even as a recruiter, but on the left side, you can see how it's a paragraph at the top. Again, I'm not trying to read a book. I want to be able to read a bullet point and understand what you were trying to say. On the right side, they convey the same exact thing, but it's a lot easier for me to look and say, oh, 20 years of blah, 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 so on and so forth. And so it's just a much easier way for me to read it. You want to make sure that if a recruiter only has your resume in their hand for 30 to 45 seconds, they're going to be able to see the key pieces of information you wanted to highlight and showcase that you are the right person for the job. So just something to keep in mind, something to continue to look at. Right side is the correct side, left side with the red name is not. And that's what it should look like when you're said and done with the edits. So I will go ahead now and turn it over to Miss Elizabeth, who's going to touch on interview preparation. I appreciate everyone's time again and hope you took something away from the resume building tips. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Eli. I appreciate it. And now that you all have your resume together and it's time to prepare for your interview, I want to talk to you a little bit about what a behavioral interview is. It is a common interview format that companies have been leveraging more now. So let's talk about what that looks like. So what is behavioral interviewing? So the theory itself denotes that the past performance is the best predictor of your future performance. Additionally, this format uses probing questions that serve to assess key areas of knowledge, skills, experience, and education. So when you're participating in these types of interviews, we recommend that you use the STAR method. So what is a STAR method? STAR. It's a structured storytelling way to cover what the question asks. So we start with the situation or the task. You're going to explain, what was the situation that you want to address? What was the action that you took to help make that situation better? What decisions did you cover to help resolve the problem? And then ultimately tell us what the results were. What actions did you take? How did you benefit your company, and what did you learn from all of this to resolve the issue? And I say the key word there is you, because what was your impact on the team? It's great that you worked in a team, but we want to know specifically, what did you do to help with that? Be thorough in your explanations, be concise but thorough, and take us through the whole story: situation, task, action, and result. Next slide, please. So now let's prepare for your behavioral-based interview. So I want to go over some tips that can help you prepare. So Elijah kind of talked about the job description and preparing and tailoring your resume to the job description. So you want to also do that when you're preparing for your interview. So review the job description and speak to the skills and competencies that are listed in the job posting. So I like to evaluate and reflect upon my background. So as a best practice, I like to go through the job description line by line, thinking about what skills and examples that I have that could relate to the experience that this role is looking for, and that could set myself apart. So we know that you're competing against other candidates, and we really want to be able to showcase some experiences that maybe another candidate might not have. I spoke to a recruiter recently who shared most students like to share an example about working in a team at school where somebody may not be pulling their weight. So most students have that example, but how can you set yourself apart if you are using that example? And now that you know the STAR method, let's start to create some of those STAR stories before your interview, because we know that when you get nervous, thinking on your feet could be a little difficult. Preparing some key experience ahead of time could be really helpful for you. So just try to think of some instances where you can highlight how you've demonstrated key competencies such as teamwork ability, how you've taken initiative, how you've handled conflict, or even how you failed but learned a valuable lesson. We know that sometimes you learn the biggest lessons in failure, so maybe you could relate that as well. So just have a couple scenarios in mind to choose from that you can highlight throughout your interview. And you want to be specific in your examples and quantify wherever possible. So Eli gave an example earlier about your resume and using a percentage. So saying that, I helped my team increase sales, that's great. But saying I helped my team increase sales by 75% over the previous month, that really helps give a clearer view of how you specifically helped impact your team. And they'll be impressed with the numbers a little more than just, I increased sales. Again, we talked about this in the resume, but in your interview, be honest. Be true to your experiences. You know your story better than anyone else. No need to embellish. It'll be pretty clear and obvious if you are stretching your story. So really showcase who you are. Be authentic. We want to know and get to know who you are and what you add to the team. I will say this many times throughout the next couple of slides, but practice, practice, practice. Talking through the scenarios, making it sound conversational and not rehearsed. You want it to feel easy and genuine. Also remember to understand your why. Why have you chosen this organization to even invest your time in? But practice will be important, and I'll keep talking about it throughout the next couple of slides. So next slide, please. So a great way to practice is to anticipate the questions and the competencies that you might be graded on during your interview. It's okay to go back to your job description and look through, as I said, go line by line, looking to try to get some hints as to what they might ask you. You can also Google some behavioral interview questions, which I'll mention again later. But let's look at some questions. For example, if you see ability to work effectively in a team environment, you can be sure that teamwork is going to be a competency that they ask in your interview. So have an example prepared for teamwork. Another pretty common one is communication, and that typically falls under excellent verbal, written, and interpersonal skills. Try not to say or or so, or like. We know that when we're nervous, we can use those filler words quite a bit. So try to be mindful of how often you are using those. And if you can't think of exactly what you need to say, it's okay to pause, take a moment, take a deep breath, regain your thoughts. It's really easy to get nervous when you're interviewing, and recruiters know that, and hiring managers know that. but we really want you to take your time, really think through what you're about to share with us, and we want to be able to understand you. So take your time, take a deep breath, and think through your answers. And preparation and being prepared and practicing is really going to help you with that. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some examples of behavioral questions. There are questions that you might be asked during an interview. And the best way to get great at something is, you guessed it, it's to practice. And this is something you can do on your own. You could do it with a friend. You could do it with a mentor, which if you haven't found a mentor yet, I think that was a previous session. You should definitely start looking for one. But using these resources will be really helpful for you. It's really easy to Google behavioral interview questions that can give you some examples to practice, but there's also a couple on the screen that we could go through. This will really help you. So if you're asked a similar question, you've already thought about it, you've already thought through it, you have a great example, you've been practicing it, and it doesn't come off like you're reading a script, which is easy to do even when you're in a phone interview. And it's also easy to spot. It makes the interviewer feel like you're not being genuine. Also, I know AI is a big thing. Try not to just put it into ChatGPT and have it give you an answer. We want you to come across as genuine. We want to hear your experiences and get to know you. So let's look at some examples of behavioral questions. Most of them will start with, tell me about a time, ... So tell me about a time that you independently implemented a new solution when others were waiting to be directed to do it. So that kind of shows and speaks to your initiative. So they're looking for that core competency of taking initiative. Problem solving. They're looking for a problem solving example. So tell me about a time when you were resolving what you initially thought was a simple issue, but it turned out to be more complicated. So the key with these types of questions is being able to anticipate them and being able to formulate a story that you could plug into any of these scenarios. So a tip I have is just to prepare 3 or 4 scenarios, have them in your back pocket. So when you're asked, you have a couple of options to choose from. Next slide, please. So next, I want to talk through some interview etiquette. In recent years, we know virtual interviews have become a primary format for organizations hiring. So I wanted to give you some tips that you can use to prepare. And I think these tips can also be used, of course, in person. So dressing appropriately on Zoom. We've heard the joke over the last couple of years, you might be professional on top and you might have shorts or yoga pants on as your bottoms, but really dress appropriately. I dress full head to toe, even if you're on Zoom. First of all, you never know if you have to get up during your interviews, so you want to make sure you're prepared, but also it helps with your confidence. When you look good, you feel good, and it comes across in your interview. So make sure you're dressing for your interview, head to toe, being prepared. Speak clearly and concisely. Think about how you're presenting yourself to communication. And it kind of goes back to what I spoke to earlier, watching your ums and your ahs and your likes, your filler words, but making sure you're speaking clearly, concisely, so they can understand you. Having stable internet connection, this is hugely important. You don't want to get to your interview and have your internet cut out accidentally, or something happen where you're not able to connect. Make sure if you need to connect directly to the router or the modem, or go to a library, be somewhere where you have stable internet connection. Also, having a background that's free of distractions. Make sure you're limited background noise. I know a lot of us have pets, or you might have a young child at home. It could be really distracting, not only to you as you're trying to come up with some of these responses, but also to your interviewer who's really trying to focus on what you're saying. So try to be somewhere that's quiet, that won't distract you, so you could really focus on what you're saying. Next slide, please. So let's talk through engaging your interviewer. So whether this is in person or virtually, body language is very important. They want to know that you are genuine and that you are focused and you are involved in this interview. body language, smiling, acknowledging, being aware of your hands. I know I tend to talk a lot with my hands. You can't see them right now, but I am a big talker with my hands. But be aware of your hands so it's not too distracting. Try to look them in the eyes and seems more natural, so they know you're engaging. Also engage with everyone in the meeting. So if there are multiple people that you're interviewing with, make sure that you are speaking to each of them. Maybe use one of their names. If you're on camera, try to look directly at the camera so they know that you're looking at them and you're engaged. So eye contact is important. Communication, as I've mentioned several times, communication is hugely important. Speaking concisely, clearly. Also, try not to be too relaxed. I know I've been on an interview before where we were all getting along so well, laughing and joking, and I had to remind myself, like, this is an interview, you know, make sure you stay professional. So make sure you're not too relaxed and establish a good rapport. And we know that asking questions is one of the highest indicators that you are engaged in an interview. So always make sure you have good questions prepared. Make sure they're lined up. So at the end of the interview, we know that they will always ask, do you have any questions? Make sure you have a couple. Sometimes they get answered throughout the interview, so you don't want to get stuck with not having anything. So a couple questions that you can ask throughout the interview could be, can you give me some examples of projects that I'd be assigned? This really helps you understand the scope of what work you'll be doing. Also, ask them what success looks like for someone in your position. This shows them that you are eager to learn, that you want to be successful, that you want to contribute to your team. So asking them about success is a great question. Questions to avoid. So you really want to make sure that you're avoiding questions that could easily be searched later. You want to make sure you're taking this time to ask questions that will be helpful to you later. So anything that could be searched later, questions about pay, time off, benefits, anything like that, you can ask the recruiter at a later time. I also would avoid asking questions about changing the job duties, the schedule, or the salary. But definitely make sure you're having questions. It's a great time to ask about projects or any questions that will help you understand the role a little better. Next, we'll talk about some do's and don'ts of your interviews. So I have a quick list, and of course, these can be related to virtual or in person. So do's, know the time and location of your interview. If you're virtual, make sure you're arriving a little early to the waiting room. If you're in person, arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. Maybe if you're not sure where you're going or where to park, do a run through, a dry run, so you feel calm, cool, collected the day of the event. You're not rushed and you're not going to be late. Practice your behavioral stories. Use your real life examples. I know this is the motto of my whole presentation, is to practice. Again, dress appropriately, head to toe, make sure you're dressed appropriately. I always recommend business professional attire. I would rather be overdressed than underdressed. So dress appropriately, be presentable, and prepared for your interview. Listen carefully to each question that they ask, so you're answering correctly. Listen also to things that your interviewer might share about themselves that maybe you could use later in a question. Limit rambling and tangents and focus. Again, that goes back to your communication, being concise, answering the question in the STAR method. Don't forget the STAR method throughout your interview. And this is a big one, which just in general, but treat other people you encounter with courtesy and respect. From the minute you step out of the car, you never know who you're going to interact with, and you don't know who you're speaking to. So always be professional, be courteous. I know there's been a time where I've been on the elevator where students were chatting and they didn't realize I was also part of the team that they were just interviewing with. So you never know who you're going to be around. So just be mindful, be courteous, be respectful. And then come prepared, as I've said before, with well thought out questions to ask during your interview. And our don'ts, don't forget where you're going. Don't forget the location and the time. Don't be late. Don't be rushing. Don't forget to practice. Don't forget the dress code. Try not to be distracted. Listen carefully and try not to ramble. Don't forget to, of course, treat people with respect and courtesy, as well as preparing your thought out questions. So next we'll talk about how to close the interview. So you've made it this far, you're in the home stretch, and you are acing it. You're doing so good because you've practiced, you have your interview questions or your questions prepared. So how do you close out on a strong note? So I would would suggest always asking about the timeline of the process. If they didn't already speak about it earlier in the interview, it's okay to ask what are the next steps or when should I expect to hear back from the recruiter. Also remember, people tend to like to talk about themselves. So one of those questions that you may be able to ask, as I mentioned earlier, you picked up on something that the interviewer said. He's been with the company for a certain amount of years. So you can ask, you mentioned that you've been with the organization for 10 years. What keeps you with this organization? This demonstrates that you were listening to their introduction and also that you're interested in more of what they have to say. So they tend to like questions like that. I would never say, I have no questions. This can inadvertently communicate that you've not been listening, or that you believe you know everything and you don't need to ask any other questions. So try to have some questions. So we have a couple examples of questions you can ask. I gave you some information on my most recent leadership experience and ability to collaborate at all levels of the organization. What other information could be helpful? This is a great way to summarize your strengths and how they fit with the organization, closing out on a strong note and asking a great question. So again, being prepared, having some of those questions in mind, ready to go. So next we'll talk about following up. So you've mastered the interview, you've aced it, you've done great, you're up to this far, and you've walked away. What do you do next? How do you get feedback? So I would recommend that later in the day or the following day, you send an email to the hiring manager, thanking them for the opportunity to learn more about the role in the company. I would not use this as a second opportunity to interview or clarify anything that you may have felt short on or you forgot to mention. However, use this as a time to express your excitement for the role and then follow up with the recruiter for next steps. Also, don't forget to thank your recruiter for the opportunity, and you can ask them for the timeline on the next steps. So once you know the communication timeline and how that'll work, please respect it. So if they tell you, we'll get back to you by April 15th, give them until April 15th. It's okay to follow up a few days after that just to see, reconfirm your interest and excite and let them know you're still excited, but try not to sound too overbearing or pushy. You want to give them just a little nudge to get more information, but don't go too far. So just give them the time that they ask for. A lot of times there's a lot of red tape, or a manager might be out of the office. There's a lot in the process of the hiring process. So give them the time to really be thorough and get back to you. Be patient. We know you're excited, but just be patient. So after the interview, what to do if you get a no. We know in the event that you don't secure the role, don't get discouraged. We know that it could be difficult, but accept the rejection in a professional manner. We know that the job market is extremely competitive, and while you've been doing all the things to prepare for the role, you don't know what other candidates have been doing. So it's okay to feel sad or disappointed and go through the grieving process. Those feelings are valid, but I personally believe that every no gets you closer to a yes. So I also think that interview was great practice for you for the next one. So now you've had the practice, you've been through it once, and the next time you will do even better. So keep your head up and be positive. Oftentimes we know that no's come with a sense of a time of self-reflection. So you could think about what you could have done differently. It could hopefully serve as a motivator to continue improving yourself. You can also sign up for job alerts with the company for roles that you're interested in. I can't tell you how many times a manager is impressed by the candidate and they weren't the right fit for that role, but they know of another role that that candidate might be good for. So keep in touch, keep looking, keep networking. And it's okay to reach back out later if there is a role you're interested in. Keep in touch with your recruiter. But again, keep your head up and know that this was great practice and the right role will come for you. So just keep practicing and getting better. So I hope that all the information covered today will help you as you start practicing for your interviews. Make sure you're visiting your career services center or asking your mentors for help with your resume as well as your interview. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dewey so we can hear some of your questions. So thank you all.
Hey, Liz, Eli, kudos on a really, really, really dynamic presentation. And I think some really good action items here. that we'll be spotlighting on. Love so many of the tips that you all shared. Thanks for sharing them so freely. The Q&A box is being populated. We've had several questions that have come in so far. We're going to give those to Sheena and to Mr. Thompson here in just a moment to walk through. I also know you have some other members of the band that are sitting on the sidelines, just in case you need to phone a friend, right? Just in case. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? That's a show I'm thinking about where you can phone a friend, right? The scholars, they're like, who wants to be a millionaire? What does that do? They're just kidding. But listen, I'm just going to remind folks, when you submit those questions, they are coming into us confidentially. Certainly your name and information will be on the questions, but we do not read your name on the broadcast. So just know, if you have a question that's top of mind, someone may have that same question, drop it into the chat. We promise to sanitize it before we read the question. Liz, Eli, I'll give you all one that's from my side, and then we're going to bring on Mr. Thompson and Sheena for next steps. Talk about how maybe the game has changed a little bit when you're dealing with AI. There are so many tools that are out there now that can help you get prepared or for an interview, or give you an opportunity to maybe do some rehearsing but still not sound scripted. Are there some benefits to maybe using that type of technology? And are there any downsides to maybe using technology in a different way? Would you all touch on that, the AI space, for a moment, please?
Perfect. I can go first.
Sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth. Yeah.
It's always ladies first, Eli. Come on now. We know this.
Thank you,
it's always
Eli.
ladies first.
Well, I'll say that with AI, it could be a double-edged sword because there are so many positives. But I would say on the negative side, if you put your questions into AI to get your answers, it comes across as inauthentic, and we can easily pick up on that. I can't tell you how many essays I've read where they all start with the same couple of sentences, and it's so evident that they didn't put the work in. So I would recommend being authentic, being genuine. That's what we want. We want to get to know you. So, we can use them as a tool to help, but really try to not lean on AI as much, so you can come across as genuine and authentic.
Okay, Liz, helpful. Eli, artificial intelligence, man, good, not good? How do you balance it out, Sue?
Yeah, I think I like how you worded it in the beginning when you were asking the question. And I think AI is a tool, and that's what it should be. It's not an end all be all. It is a tool. There is benefits to it, as Elizabeth mentioned there. It's a great way maybe to figure out how to word things on your resume, or get ideas going on how you might be able to present information about yourself. However, like Elizabeth said, it can also become a double-edged sword and make you feel disingenuine. And I'll tell you one thing, and it's that if you type something common into AI to get an answer and you threw it on your resume, or maybe you answered an interview question with it, odds are 50 other people have done the same thing. And I can tell you, we know you're using it. And as good as it might sound across the AI reading out to you, we 100% can tell if you've been interviewing one type of way this entire time, and we got to a technical question and you got real buttoned up or real robotic, we know. So it's a tool, use it as a tool, use it to your benefit, get ideas stirring, but then rely on your skills and yourself. If we're talking to you, you did something right. So just trust in your ability and make sure you come prepared. If you do that, you don't need AI.
Love it. Love it. Hey, listen, we're going to give it to Sheena, Mr. Thompson. After this, we've got a 15-second follow-up. And Elizabeth or Eli, please touch on this one. How do creative young students or folks that are aspiring to go into careers maybe in the arts or in creative spaces, how do they shine on paper? They can't put together the 20-page portfolio, or they can't show you the amazing skills that they have on the oboe or in the dance halls. How do you spotlight those types of things on a resume, or how do you do some follow-ups? Please take a moment to unpack that one for us.
Ladies first, chivalry.
I'll let you take that one first. I'll let you take that one first, Eli.
Okay. I appreciate it.
And again, maybe it's a web designer. Maybe it's not in the fine arts. Maybe it's a web designer or someone that's got a lot of coding experience. How does that come through on paper, guys?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and one that I can relate to a little bit, because before I got into the recruitment realm, my major was public relations, and there was a lot of different things I did that were more artistic, like graphic design and things of that nature.
Sure.
And so, the way to highlight it is, I would say, usually when you're in that space, you have projects, whether that's through school or through internships or something like that. I would highlight maybe 1, 2, or 3 of your top projects that you feel encompassed all of the skill sets that you built up and
Nice.
touch on those
nice.
projects and what you did. So highlight them through that. And then, you know, like, as Dewey just mentioned, if it is like more coding languages and things like that, I always love having relevant skill section on resumes. That could be a personal decision, but as a recruiter, if I can just go, I used to do tech recruiting all the time. And so having a little skills section where I could see all the program languages that you knew how to use was really helpful. And I didn't have to go digging through, 50 bullet points to find it. It was right there. But outside of that, I would say highlight projects and what kind of skill sets you used on those projects to encompass the what you're trying to translate.
Love it. And Liz, I guess you can bring those up through your STAR method, right? Hey, if it's not showing up on paper, bring that in through your other examples. Please close us out on this topic.
Yeah, so the one thing I would recommend is joining clubs on campus that kind of relate to maybe you're looking to go into finance, so you join a finance club. You could still be an art major, but you're interested in finance. So it shows that you still have that interest. It gives you a little more experience, and it gives you some examples that you can use during your interview and include your STAR method with. So definitely looking for other opportunities to kind of expand your experience and your knowledge, and it shows that you are interested in those.
Awesome. Awesome. Eli, Liz, great stuff here. I want to go ahead and bring back on Mr. Thompson and Sheena. My goodness, Mr. Thompson, we got some time here. I'm going to give it to you all. I know the Q&A box is filling up. I know you all have some things top of mind, so please. What have you heard so far that stood out? And then jump in with that Q&A.
Man, great stuff, Elizabeth and Elijah. The game has changed in HR. I mean, through the years since Dewey, since you and I came into the league. So one question before and here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna toss it to Sheena. And Sheena, you've got some pre-submitted questions you're gonna walk us through. But here's a question for both of these heavy hitters who just shared with us. I've seen resumes where young budding executives would post a link with a video personal statement on it. Is that good or bad?
Honestly, I would say I'm indifferent about it. If I'm being 100% honest with you, I'm probably not going to look at it unless I select your resume beyond that initial first scrub. So I think it could be good and maybe in later stages if your resume was already up to par and got you selected. But if I'm just doing an initial scrub, 99% of the time, I'm probably not clicking on that to look at what you had to say. And I'm just going to review the content of your resume.
Okay. Good enough. Good enough. Well, we got a ton of questions, and Sheena, how do you want to do this, Sheena? Because I know you've got a lot of questions, and I saw some others coming in through the chat box. So I'll toss it to you now. You take us through it. How's that?
Yes. Okay. So I'll do the questions in the chat, and then the pre-submitted. If there's anybody that has any other questions, or was roll with the ones that are in the chat. So somebody said, somebody has recommended them to put on their resume that it should be 2 pages long due to all the experience that they have. Do you feel like, I know in the beginning you guys talked about that 1 pager, trying not to max it out by 1. Is it okay to have 2, or, or yours, it's a hard deadline or a hard, break of just 1?
No, it's definitely okay to have more than 1 in certain circumstances. So, if you're a seasoned professional and have quite a lot of experience to add on there, then yes, obviously don't bypass some of your relevant experience or projects or roles because it surpassed 1 page. But I would just ensure if it does go over 1 page, 2 things I would consider. 1, are you reiterating experience that you've already demonstrated? And 2, is it strong enough to consider going over that page? But most people, including Wells Fargo, we don't have like a hard 1-page limit. It's not going to stop me from looking in through 2 or 3 pages, but just definitely make sure all of it is relevant and you can't lower it down to 1 page.
Gotcha. There's another question for you, Elijah. How would you draft your resume for a college job fair? A lot of times people add on their skills like Java or be able to use Word? Is there a certain section that you have to put on your resume to know what kind of your skills and things that you would like to put on your resume? Is that something that you would do in regards to going to college fairs or just giving people your resume in a sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good question. And college fairs are probably the outlier where I said tailor it to the job description, because obviously there's no job description going to a college fair. So I think the important thing when going to college fairs is one, to get to your first question, is there a way to list relevant experience and things of that nature? I do think a skills tab would be nice to have on a resume. But I also want to caution when I say skills, I don't mean like skills like, oh, I'm a hard worker, things like that's good, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking like hard skills like program languages, and if you know how to code with this or Java or whatever, that's always relevant. Relevant coursework is also nice, but when it comes to building out a complete resume for a job fair, I would do some research on what companies are going to be there, and also have an understanding of what kind of role that you would like to go for. So it's always important to know, I really would love to get into marketing, or I'd love to become a recruiter, and then make sure that you understand which companies that would be relevant to that are going to be there so you can go and talk to them. Also making sure that you've also highlighted all of your experience and skills that would translate over to that role in general. If you find out that they have an opening on a team after your conversation, you can always go back and retailer your resume, but definitely do research on who's going to be there. Think about the job that you're trying to go for, and then tailor it the best of your ability to that type of career path.
Great. Elizabeth, there's a question. Well, it's my question, but I guess somebody else asked it as well. When we talked about the interviews and the question that you asked during the interview, I know my parents growing up told me you at least have to have 3 questions. Before you leave out an interview, have 3 questions. Is there a number that you would recommend for somebody to have in regards to questions after an interview, just to make sure that they, are engaged, like you talked about? Is there a number that you would put on how many questions they should be asking at the end of an interview?
Yeah, sure. And that's great advice from your parents. I, as I've said several times, highly recommend having questions. I would ask about 3 questions. I wouldn't ask too many, just because you want to be mindful of the time of the interviewer. But if, try to think of really strong, heavy hitting questions that you want to make sure get answered. Also know that sometimes, like when I go to interviews, have a list of questions, because sometimes those questions get answered throughout the interview and you can mark those off. You don't have to ask those at the end, but at the end you have still a couple left that you can ask. So I would say 3 might be a good sweet number to keep.
I'll definitely tell my parents that was good advice.
Yes, for sure it was.
There's another question. So when, this day and age, we're always on our computers. Now it's, appropriate for people to have Zooms and virtual meetings. What happens if you're on an interview and you're, trying to get this job and your internet shuts down, or something happens with the connection of your internet, or somebody's not able to hear you? What is something that you can do to make sure that the interviewer knows that there was an issue or something was happening? What's a good step to let to kind of go through that process of knowing that something happened?
Sure. Yeah. And that was one of the tips I gave, is to try to be somewhere with stable internet connection. And however, we know that outside forces could influence and something could happen, your power goes out or whatnot. But do your best to start in a place where you can have stable internet. But if that does happen, I would immediately, maybe from your phone, you still have access and can reach out to the recruiter to let them know what happened. But as soon as you're able, or, if you're in an unsafe situation, as soon as you're in a safe place, make sure that you reach out to the recruiter, let them know what happened. So that way you don't leave the manager waiting, wondering what happened. And also just being professional about it. But definitely, as soon as you can reach out and let them know what happened. And I'll look to Eli. Anything to add to that as a recruiter? Maybe that's happened to you before.
Yeah, no, it definitely happens every single recruiting season. It's just part of Zoom interviews and the day and age we live in. But yeah, like Elizabeth said, it's always good beforehand. Make sure you have the recruiter's contact information handy, whether that's their email or their phone number. And if that happens, reach out immediately. The other thing I would always say is a good best practice is usually if it's like a Zoom interview or Teams interview, however virtual interview setting you have, take a picture of the information beforehand because there's usually a dial-in number. And so even if your Wi-Fi goes out and you can't get on your laptop, I've had students call in to the interview. I just move them in on their phone and they'll keep it that way and it doesn't ding them or anything like that. We understand things happen. So make sure you have all of the information prior to going into your interview to reach out to the recruiter, but also any extra means of being able to hop onto the interview, like maybe through calling in or something of that nature, should something happen.
Thank you. Okay, great. We have a few more questions. Somebody asked, they're a few years out of college. Would you still recommend for them to keep their education at the top? Particularly if it's a reputable school or institution. So even if you're out of college or maybe a few couple years, is it still good to keep your education at the top of your resume? Is what they're asking. I guess we can push that for Elijah or Elizabeth, whoever wants to answer.
Personally, I think yes, you should still have it at the top because I can tell you, it goes back to looking at the requirements. I hire for jobs sometimes that require a bachelor's degree or, advanced beyond that. And so you might have 20 years of experience, but if my requirement was that you got a bachelor's degree, as shaky as that seems, the experience doesn't matter if you don't have that one qualifying bachelor's degree. So it's just something to include at the top. It doesn't take much space, and it automatically lets me know that I can do more digging into your experience once I see you've checked that education box. So best practice, even if there's not an educational requirement, I would just leave it at the top just for best practice. And another thing, typically you can put your highest degree of education first. I see some people that have their bachelor's degrees and then their high school. We know you went to high school if you have your bachelor's degree, and then likewise, if you have your master's degree, you can list both. That's not as crazy to do. But if you just were to list your master's, I know that you probably had to get your bachelor's. So that's another way you can kind of maximize spacing if you're having trouble with that, but definitely keep it at the top, in my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, here's another question that's come. The questions are coming in the chat. Another question is, as college students, we're getting out of college, we're trying to get to the money. We're trying to get to that, secure our bag and get to our next job. What is the appropriate time when you were going for these interviews? What's an appropriate time to ask about salary? I know Elizabeth said, in the initial, don't talk about salary, don't talk about benefits, don't even try to talk about how to switch your schedule around. But when is a good time to talk about, the salary, the benefits? And, is it a way where you can eliminate it if they ask at the wrong time? Like, when is it a time where you can ask or, just find out when you get that offer letter?
A good question. I mean, there's not really a playbook, I guess. I would say feel it out, understand who you're talking to, and understand how the context of those interviews are going. Usually, I would say, like Elizabeth said in the beginning, don't ask right away. Trust me, I understand wanting to go chase your bag out of college and set yourself up. But, from an employer standpoint, we don't want that to be the end all be all because we want you to still be invested in the opportunity that we have for you. There's a whole nother section and probably a whole nother webinar series we could do on chasing your bag and should you be as concerned with it as you think you should be. So if we have one of those series coming up, I'd love to be a part of that. But in all honesty, like I said, just feel it out. I would say a good rule of thumb typically is like maybe towards the final interview, if you're feeling like it went really solid and maybe you get an indicator from the hiring manager that will be in contact soon, you can approach it as in, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Very excited about having the opportunity to potentially work here. I was curious to know when I would be able to find out more about maybe salary ranges, benefit details, information like that, so that you're not as direct and seeming like you're going for the power money grab, but you still can have it brought into the conversation. And if they're able to talk about it, then they will. And sometimes we're not able to talk about it until we release the offer. So just know that too. It's not that we want to be shady or anything like that, but sometimes, like for myself, I do not talk about salary information until you're getting an offer. And then from there, we can have our discussions, and that's just how it is. And so it's different everywhere. Feel it out. have a good understanding of it, and then, approach it lightly. Don't go so super head on with it.
Right. Thank you. Another question that was posed in the chat is what is the best way to network and recruiting in this field, I guess, of banking? I know a lot of times we're in a competitive industry. There are thousands and of different collegiate, institutions everywhere, higher education. What is the best way to kind of put yourself out there when it comes to, any field, honestly, in regards to any field? There's so many different places that you can go, and so there's sometimes also a stigma or a stereotype that most people only look at the Ivy League schools. So I think that this question just wants to go towards about how do you put yourself out there in regards to getting in your field when it comes to people trying to recruit you?
That's a great question. I love it. And I would say this is feedback I received from, I remember in college, one of my first weeks of school, my instructor told us to use being a student to your advantage, reach out to professionals, reach out to alumni. People, again, like to talk about themselves. So reach out. Can I have 15 minutes of your time for a coffee chat? I'm curious about your industry. I'm still trying to figure out what I would like to do when I graduate. And I see that you're a recruiter and would love to know more about what the recruiting field is like. Again, you're not taking up a whole lot of time. If they have more time, they'll certainly give it to you, but definitely reaching out to people. They want to help you. Also joining clubs and any groups that you're in, seeing if they're alumni of those and your sororities, fraternities, continuing to network with some of those organizations in your church, in your community. There are always people who would like to give back. Finding a mentor, joining a mentorship program. I know we have one here at Wells Fargo that I run, our Go Far Diversity mentorship program, where we partner you with a mentor. That's a great way to help build your network. And I would say just putting yourself out there is huge. Asking questions and just getting in front of these leaders that want to help you. We all want to help and give back.
All right, that was did anybody, Mr. Lynn, did you see anything else in the chat? Those were such great advice. Like I'm ready to already go for my next job and go for the interview. Elizabeth had taught me how to interview, and Eliza taught me how to get my resume together. So I think I'm ready for whatever job I'm going for, Mr. Lynn. I don't know about you.
I think, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Good, great. No, these are some great questions. I do know in talking with students, one of the issues about AI, artificial intelligence, when you don't depend on AI intelligence, depend on my intelligence. I guess that's what's going to get you the job at the end of the day, right?
Right.
I mean, I've been writing notes, y'all. So when I get back in the game, I'm going to use all of this stuff because if you do this the right way, Elizabeth, you and Elijah, you have given us a roadmap. There's nothing that beats desire, passion, and preparation, the skill set. I guess at the end of the day, does it matter if you fit within the organization? Because at some point, everybody has the skills. Everybody's resume lined up on the table meets the qualifications. But to work at Wells Fargo or any other corporation, you got to fit within the framework of what they're about. Let's talk about that quickly.
That's a great point. I think I talk to students all the time and let them know, like, find a way to demonstrate the value you bring. And I don't mean value in the sense of like, if you're an accounting major, that's awesome. And you have a lot of the accounting background and skills, but so do thousands of other students across the entire country. Bring the intangibles. When you show up to work, make sure that you are in an interview and through your resume, do your best to demonstrate that you're the type of person that is not just punching in for a paycheck and leaving as soon as you can. Raise your hand, show that you're hungry and you're wanting to grow, that you know that you don't have it all figured out and that you're willing to take coaching tips and be coachable. And so really, like Lynn said, that's a great point. It is about how you fit with the team. And a lot of times, if you can show you're a hard worker, you're determined, you're going to do what it takes to continue to elevate and add something to that team, then you're going to be great. I know with my team here at Wells Fargo, my job was tough. When I started, it was a learning curve, to say the least. And what got me through probably my first year was just that I fit with my team really well. And because of that, it allowed me to work on a lot better format, and it allowed me to learn a lot more quick. And so my manager probably realized that in my interview that I would have been a good team fit. And he allowed me that opportunity to come in, even though there may have been more qualified candidates. I fit the team the way that they were looking to have it fit. So show that you're a hard worker, show that you're willing to put in what you need to put in, and that you're going to be someone they want to see every day, because odds are you're going to work with them the same amount you see your family when you go home. So you want to like that person.
You're right. I mean, I can speak for the MEAC. Sheena, Dominique, who most of you haven't seen, but I know she's in the background, and Randy. Each one of them have a unique set of skills that they've brought to the table. They make the MEAC better. They're passionate. Their personalities fit, but their values are congruent with the mission and the vision of our organization. And Dewey, I know you're a baseball guy. You're an athlete. So in the locker room, those things, those intangibles come into play. And in corporate America, they come into play as well. And I think that as I toss this back to you, I think that our students who are on today need to understand that those intangibles can be valued in a tangible manner at the interview stage, once people get a real glimpse of who you are and what you can bring to the table.
Mr. Thompson, you touched on it, and those things show up. The way that you practice, the way that you prepare. You know, it's opening day, right, for Major League Baseball. The guys had spring training.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guys worked out a lot, and they got prepared. So when the opportunity comes before you, boom, you're ready to do it. So very, very important pieces there. Sheena, masterful job.
Yep.
On the facilitation there. And can't y'all tell this is like Sheena's side gig or something? She could totally be like the
I'm
Oprah
just trying to
out
get
there.
like you. I'm just trying to get like you do it. One day I want to be like you and Mr. Lean. That's why I get all of my stuff from you. Listen, I just want to be you one day.
You are very kind, and you're doing your own amazing work, and so we appreciate it. Here's what I will say, scholars: if you did not get an opportunity to submit a question, you've got the contact information for Eli. You've got Liz's contact information. Feel free to circle back with them if there are any follow-up items that you need. Hey, Liz, Eli, we got a couple of bonus minutes. I want to give you just a moment. Share a closing thought. What's one thing that you want folks to kind of take? We've got a couple of minutes here extra, and we promise to still get you guys out of here before 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight, before 9 p.m. So, Eli, let's touch on this one first. What's something else that the scholars need to take home today? So maybe they have an interview coming up next week. Maybe they're going through the process of getting that resume right. What's something they need to take home?
Just be prepared. I mean, there's a lot of tools at you guys' hands that weren't always available through social media and the internet and, you know, companies' websites. Like, there shouldn't be a reason that you can't come into an interview prepared. And I always caution it by saying prepared doesn't mean that you know everything, and it doesn't mean that you're expected to. But what it means is that you've done research. It means that you've looked into the opportunity and understand what kind of things it's going to take, and that you can convey that. Because I can tell you from as a recruiter, and the one thing I hope you guys hear is when I talk to a student that shows that they want to be at Wells Fargo and want to be in my program, that makes me want to go the extra mile for them. And really, like, if they're riding a line and I have to get in the hiring manager's ear a little bit and say, listen, like, you know, Dewey's reached out to me 3 times. He's been talking to me about what he can do, and like, he's serious about this opportunity. He just needs a chance. Those little things can make all of the difference. So do your research, come prepared, and ensure that, you know, you're proving that you want it more than the other 15 people that you're interviewing against.
That's Eli Fox, team. Elizabeth, bring us home.
Yeah,
Something that folks need to act on, please.
Just to kind of piggyback on what Eli said, the students that show the initiative, you know, it makes us want to go the extra mile to reach out. You know, I'm not necessarily a recruiter, but I have Eli's ear sometime, and, you know, can talk to him. Say, I have this great student who I met on campus. I think they'd be phenomenal. But reaching out taking the initiative, reach out to those people that, you asked about networking. We're here, we're willing to speak to you. So take those opportunities. We want to hear from you. But also go into your interview prepared, be confident, keep your head up. Don't let that imposter syndrome seep in. Don't do it. Just know that you have done the work. You deserve to be there. Be confident you've practiced and bring it home.
All right. Let's give it up, y'all, for Elizabeth and for Elijah. Great information there. If you haven't already done so, now's the time to make those LinkedIn connects with them. And again, if you didn't get an opportunity to present your question during today's broadcast, follow up, ask for 15 minutes for a virtual cup of coffee, and let's make sure we get those items to you so you can continue along your journey. All right, MEAC team, we're going to bring it home with some last items here and also some reminders. So you'll see here on the screen the 2024 Beyond College webinar series. You guys are here, right? You're here. And we've gotten 2 now completed, now very close to completing our 3rd event. And so you'll see on the next slide everything that we have in stock and everything that's coming up. Huge shout out again to the MEAC team. Their amazing digital network, the MEAC Digital Network's YouTube channel is where you can access all of the content. I do want to go back just for a moment, team. Let's take a look at it again, what we've covered off on this year and then kind of where we're headed. So the January session, all around budgeting and money management, playback available, mentor sponsors and personal board of directors. You heard Mr. Personal Brand and Personal Board of Directors. You heard Mr. Thompson and the team reference that earlier. Available on demand, very shareable. Pass that along to others that may benefit from it. Obviously, the discussion that we're having here today around resume writing. Next month, it's going to be all about graduate school, putting together a dynamic roster of speakers that are going to share their experiences as they prepared for grad school and then how they were. Really fun Q&A that we'll have for that session. Gig economy, entrepreneurship, step by step. We'll unpack those pieces post-graduation for some of you all, or right as the semester is ending there, right in the later portion or mid-portion, better yet, of May. And then securing the bag. We talked about that earlier, the importance of preparing. So we're going to talk about some things that you need to do to make sure that you're protecting your nest egg as well as your developing nest egg or the nest egg of your parents or grandparents or an aunt and uncle that's maybe close to retirement age or is already retired. So we'll spend some time on those kinds of topics as well. When we get to July, again, I'm going to continue to state my goal. I want 3,000 folks on our July 25th broadcast, 3,000. So everyone that's on the lines today, go and tell a friend, go ahead and get registered for that session because we'll be talking about the 2025 internship opportunities that will be available or the full-time roles that are available in different kinds of areas. So come and join us there July 25th. August, great discussion around success strategies for college, the finance edition, right? How do you pay for it? How do you maintain the things that you need to be doing financially along your higher education journey? We're going to get cyber smart with our friends there in September and social media smarts. Really excited about that content. Credit matters that matter. Makes perfect sense to touch on that during Get Smart about Credit Month of October. And then we'll wind up the year, and I mentioned Iwanike a little bit earlier, with a discussion on your pathway to home ownership. This is actually a brand new module that will be rolling out in November so you can start building that pathway towards home ownership. Maybe we have homeowners in our lines today. Certainly make sure that you're sharing how you were able to obtain that goal with our folks that will be joining. Okay, we touched on it, some additional resources on the next slide to stay in touch. Our talent community, this is actually a really great form. In addition to catching up with Eli and with Liz around things, you can actually scan this QR code. It'll take you over to our Beamery page. You can fill it out, share the information that's of interest to you relative to roles and opportunities. And then you can also attach a copy of your resume. So we actually do look at this report. And then in turn, we're able to get you additional information or point you in the direction of where career opportunities may exist. Hey, maybe you have a financial question. We weren't so heavy on the finance side with today's presentation, but maybe you have a financial question. Scan that QR code. Set up an appointment with a Wells Fargo banker in your local community or in your local markets. Go out to one of the branches or set up that telephone conversation where you can get your questions answered relative to building a strong financial future. Along those lines, we want everybody to be in the know relative to our LifeSync platform. Jump out to that platform. You'll be able to learn more about some of the financial tools that we have available. And maybe you're starting to invest, or you're thinking about starting an IRA or something along those lines, or maybe you're now eligible for a 401k within your institution, or you just want to know some things on the finance side. You can tap in and get some really, really great resources here through that LifeSync mobile application. Hey, we mentioned it earlier. We wanted to spotlight on the next slide all of the different institutions that are part of our HBCU Legends card program. So these are all of the schools that are in existence today. So please customize your banking experience. Swap out that amazing red Wells Fargo debit card that you have for one of the amazing institutions here. I certainly have some of my favorites. I won't name them, but you saw one a little bit earlier, certainly with the MEAC card that's out there. So step in and jump in there. And again, if you do not see your card here, inboxes, reply to today's email. Let us know, and then what we can do is in turn get our partners that are leading this process and this project in contact with the appropriate folks from your institution to be able to explain how to get involved in the Legends card program. Again, these are free of charge for any of our retail banking customers. So customize your banking experience with an HBCU Legends debit card today. And listen, huge shout out. You see our limited edition cards there. So our friends of the Bayou Classic and the Florida Classic, Florida Blue Classic, and the HBCU NY Classic, and of course our friends at OBC, they're for the Orange Blossom Classic. These games will be here before we know it. And we're pretty excited that we have those brand marks available for each. Hey, with that said, some thank yous. Just want to thank all of our presenters, all the amazing folks from Wells Fargo that were on with us today for the great information that you all shared. And what we'll say is that the landscape is incredibly competitive right now. Yeah. Make sure that you're finding ways to differentiate and spotlight your skills. And we had someone that put a question in or a comment relative to this. You're going to have to stay engaged, continue those conversations, continue the outreaches through LinkedIn, continue to engage with partners that you've met today or in other instances to say, hey, these are the things that are important to me. These are the things that I want to do long-term as I develop my career, and I want to be able to begin that with Wells Fargo. Make sure that you're spotlighting those things. Make sure you're spotlighting the skills and experiences that you've had. It's going to position you to be able to get either to the medal rounds or to get on the top of the winner's stand for that right role and opportunity. So just another word of encouragement there as you all are continuing to strengthen those resumes and strengthening those interview skills for the future. With that said, everybody enjoy the rest of your day. We've got March Madness going on, so you got basketball that you can watch tonight. We talked just earlier, our friends in Major League Baseball, they kicked off their season today. I need everybody to cheer for the New York Mets. They don't play until Friday, but cheer for them. And we hope that they will have an amazing, amazing year. But until then, everybody, look forward to being with you for our next broadcast coming up on April the 25th. We're gonna unpack that process and help you chart a path to graduate school successfully. MEAC team, thank you all so much for all you're doing. Wells Fargo team, couldn't do it without you. Everyone have a great, great rest of your day. Continue to stay safe. Let's finish the semester strong. Wells Fargo team is here to help. Good night, everybody.